Guten Moed and a Guten Erev Shabbos. If you're a fan of literature, you'll recognize about a half a dozen book titles in the first chapter of Koheles, the book of Ecclesiastes, which we normally read on Shabbat, Chol, Hamoed, Sukkot. You'll see The Sun Also Rises in there, a book by Hemingway, Remembrance of Things Past by Proust, That Which Has Been is That Which Shall Be, Shakespeare's Sonnets, and bonus points for you if you noticed All the Rivers Run to the Sea, which is Elie Wiesel's first volume of memoirs, and the sequel, And the Sea is Never Full. Authors from Tolstoy to T.S. Eliot to Edith Wharton borrowed lines from other chapters in the book, but the single most quoted part of Koheles, of the book of Ecclesiastes, is actually quite an unfortunate mistranslation if we look just a little bit more closely. The opening line of the book of Koheles, Ecclesiastes, reads as follows. It says, Divrei Koheles ben David, Melech b'Yerushalayim. This is, doesn't say his name, but we know it's Shlomo, King Solomon, King David's son, and he's reflecting on, he's the king in Yerushalayim, and he's reflecting on life, reflecting on the meaning of it all. The second verse reads as follows, Hevel Havalim, Amar Koheles, Hevel Havalim, Hakol Havel. This won't ruin it for you because it's already been ruined by 400 years of King James. What we should stop saying is, the way they translate it, vanity of vanities, says Koheles, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That's a wrong translation. So strike it now from your mental list of biblical quotes. Take a moment to delete that permanently from your files. I'll give you a second. Hevel is a breath, a shallow breath. What is life in Koheles' phrasing? The shallowest of breaths, he says. The shallowest breath, it's all but the shallowest breath. That's how the Koran translates it in the Koran Machzor for Sukkot, which some people brought on the first day of Yom Tif. It was published just a few years ago under Rabbi Sachs's direction. To say that all is vanity or emptiness or worthless pursuits would really be, if you think about it, a contradiction to all of Jewish thought, that everything comes to nothing. We don't believe that. We do not believe that everything comes to nothing. We believe it's all precious, it's all worthwhile, it's all valuable. So whenever we see everything is vanity, that should really go against our grain, should bother us. There's a very compelling lecture from Rabbi Sachs that you can watch online on his website, or you can get the Machzor and you can read an essay about Koheles in the introduction. And in the notes of the text, again, meant to be read on in Shul on Shabbos Chol Hamoed, Sukkos, tomorrow. This year we will not be doing it in the interest of time, as last year. And for the last few years when there was no Shabbos Chol Hamoed, because Yom Tov started and ended on Shabbos, we had to sort of squeeze it in there on Shmini Atzeres. So this one book of Tanakh has certainly not got its appropriate due from us in recent years. Maybe that's even more of a reason for you to spend an hour or two with it at some point in the coming days to listen to its message. If you have the Machzor, good. If you have a stone chumash, it's in the back. And if you have a Tanakh or if you have the 5 Megillas, you'll find it there also. The word Hevel appears some 38 times in this book, which is more than half of its appearances in the entire Tanakh, beginning to end. So it's definitely a key term here. And if Jewish life is all about finding meaning, it really would be heresy to say that life is vanity. So it's good that we understand what the book is not saying. It's not saying that all is vanities. We have to appreciate the where it's coming from and what it means. The pseudonym that's given at the beginning there, Koheles, is fairly apparent, as we said, that this son of David, who's the king in Jerusalem, is King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. He clearly fits the biography that's laid out in the course of the book. What's more, the idea of Kohelet, the name Kohelet, his sort of pen name in this book, you'll recognize in that the root word kahal, a congregation, as in kehila, as in kehilat sha'arei Torah, speaking about a congregation, but not just any congregation, a special kind of gathering together, special kind of congregating that the entire Jewish nation does once every 7 years, following the Shemitah year. It's the Hakel year, in which everyone gathers during Sukkot in Yerushalayim to hear the king read portions of the Torah. If you recall, it was the penultimate mitzvah of the 613 that we discussed just a few weeks ago back in Parshat Nitzavim. The wisdom that's expressed in Koheles, and really in the entire section of the Tanakh, which is called the Holy Writings, Ktuvim, Ksuvim, is the most universal and widely adopted by the nations of the world. The Chumash The first 5 books are really distinctly Jewish. It's our story, our national story, and it's our way of life. The Nevi'im, the prophets, are the moral and the ethical call, studied, if not always lived, by other nations, but still quite particularly Jewish in outlook and attitude and context. The wisdom of Proverbs, the wisdom of Koheles, Ecclesiastes we're talking about here, King David's Psalms, the cry of Lamentations. These are some of the most universally revered statements about the human condition. The book of Koheles seems sometimes to be a damper, a downer, a depressing one, a counterweight, many say, to the excessive joy on Sukkot. Of the many things that we've had to worry about in the COVID era, perhaps excessive rejoicing has not exactly been one of our chief worries. Really, the book talks about the nature of simcha, about what joy is when you find it. There's a 7-fold description of somewhat dispiriting reflections, followed each time by a reference to joy. That's the structure of the book. To underscore the mood, there's a coda at the end of the book, about 10 lines, about how really a person should enjoy, get the most out of life. The theme at the outset that we spoke about, Hevel Havalim, that life is the most fleeting of breaths, tells us that it's precious. Not that it's empty, but that it's precious. It's very tenuous. And if we appreciate it, that it will not last forever, we'll be moved to find good, to find joy, find meaning, purpose in our lives. That's the emes of simcha. It's a reflection on mortality, on the transient nature of this world. Not that that's a bad thing, but rather that it's a great opportunity to use our gifts, not to amass things, but to pursue meaning, to find fulfillment, and build connections. It's not a simple, pure joy that's depicted in Koheles' reflections, meditation. Rather, it's a very wise one, born of awareness and contemplation of the fragility and therefore the preciousness of life. With this understanding, Koheles doesn't dampen the spirit of Yom Tov, Sukkos, Zman Simchatenu, as it's called in the davening. Rather, it highlights it, it underscores it, and it gives it a meaning and a context from a wise and experienced perspective. Please God, may this added insight enhance and spotlight our rejoicing, even in this challenging time, which wherever we are and whatever the headlines in the newspaper say, remains and will always be the season of our joy. Good Shabbos, good Yom Tov, Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.